stupid people. What is the stupidest thing you've done? I have two. The time I ended up in the hospital because of pasta. So one night I was doing dishes that I had left for about a week, uni life, and there was a piece of pasta heavily crusted onto the bottom of the pot. I couldn't get it off with a sponge or with a brush I was using, so I tried to pick it off with my nails. I managed to pick a little bit too hard and boom, the pasta shard is under my thumbnail. I decided to play it safe and go to the ER, and the doctor that ended up seeing me 3 hours later told me that I had made the right choice coming in, which made me feel a bit better. A couple of scalpels, some surgical scissors, and 30 minutes of excruciating pasta extraction later, I walked out of the hospital. It hurt like an absolute witch for the next week. I was told that I was the only pasta-related injury any of the doctors in the hospital at the moment had ever seen. The time I literally tried to be a helicopter and I broke my wrist. I was 4 years old and on a field trip with my kindergarten class. It was lunchtime and we were all sitting in a jungle gym eating our lunches. And for whatever reason, I decided it was a good idea to stop eating my lunch and walk to the top of the jungle gym so I could jump off. Don't ask me to explain it. It's been 17 years and I'm still amazed at my own inexplicable stupidity. I'm fortunate not to have won a Darwin Award so far. I'd recently learned what a helicopter was and was amazed that they could fly just by spinning things around. My flawless logic of the day was, if they can do it, why can't I? So, seemingly without any discernible reason, little 4-year-old me put down his sandwich, marched to the top of the jungle gym, put his arms out at his sides, and jumped off spinning around in my best helicopter impression. And that was how I got my first ambulance ride. From helicopter kid to hospital patient, a dramatic career change, if you ask me. Story 2. My parents left the country one summer for 2 weeks and left me alone, so I decided it was a perfect opportunity to have some of my closest friends over often. My rents lived out in the middle of nowhere with the nearest neighbors 100 yards away, plus the house had a pool and a hot tub, so it was a perfect setup. The first night I had people over, the hot tub got nasty. We may have exceeded maximum capacity a little bit. So my bright idea was to siphon all the water out of the tub directly into the pool and refill the tub with the hose. Worked perfect. Hot tub clean, pool a little bit warmer. The next night, word was catching on and the group of friends increased some in size. Again, the hot tub water was almost opaque by next morning. No problem. Hot tub water went into the pool, refreshed tub with clean hose water. Third night, yuck, yuck, yuck. But you know the drill. Hot tub gunk dumped into the pool. Where's the bottom of the pool? Now I have a problem. In my efforts to keep the tub clean, I had neglected the pool water, which had been slowly turning into a sickly grayish green color. Uh-oh. Filters should take care of it by the time parents come home in a week, right? I thought to myself, but what if it didn't? How could I ensure the pool water would be crystal clear for my spectacularly strict parents? That's when the genius idea bulb went off in my head. 20 minutes later, I had tens of thousands of gallons of water roaring out of the pool, working its way down the mountain like a grand liquid chlorinated avalanche. Oh no, you didn't, you say. Yes, I did. I was feeling smug about my dirty water problem solution when I noticed the shape of the inside of the pool becoming less defined. You see, we have a vinyl skin for the interior of the pool, and guess what held it down against the concrete? That's right, the water. To my horror, the blue skin was methodically sucking itself off the walls and bottom. Immediately, I stopped the exodus of water, the pool now only a couple feet deep in the far side. The shallow side was a little wrinkled, but I could salvage the deep end. Now, how was I going to fill up the pool again? Well, what worked for the hot tub? Oh yeah, the water hose. I was sure it could fill up the pool in 5 days. So I turned on the water, confident that the pool would be full of clean, well water presently. Oh yeah, that's right. The house used well water, and after a few days of pumping, the water didn't flow out so quickly anymore. 5 days from the beginning of the refill, the water was just reaching the shallow end, and Mom and Dad were coming home the next day. For the last 24 hours before my parents flew back into Roanoke, I was so terrified I was physically ill. By this point, at least the water reached the far side of the pool, so the vinyl on that end was no longer a rubber trampoline, but a wrinkled giant model of the Appalachian Mountains, if the Appalachians were covered in gigantic blue pebble wallpaper, that is. I tried putting the pool cover on the water to hide the shallowness. Unfortunately, the Lord did not answer my prayers and make it magically thick and opaque enough to hide the damage or depth of the water. Forlornly, I thought about what was probably going to be the last few hours of my life. I asked friends to come over for sympathy and support, but no one had enough of a passing wish to come with me to greet my parents. As if dealing with my parents' arrival at home wasn't enough, I had to pick them up from the airport. I hopped into their 4Runner and probably for the only time in my life drove under the speed limit the whole way to Roanoke. I tell you that to this day, every cheerful teeny bopper song that K92 played on that drive still brings chills to my spine. A pox on you, CNC Music Factory. I finally got to the terminal just in time to see my executioners pull up to the gate. I could clearly hear my heart thumping as one by one the passengers disembarked through the door. Could it be? Maybe they missed their flight and I wouldn't have to deal with this for several more. Tanman, we're over here. My parents, as always, came out with the last few passengers haggard from their 20-hour journey from India. To them, it was still Indian time, something like 3 a.m. in the morning, but they were happy to see me. My mom rushed up to me and hugged me hard. My dad gave me the fatherly half-hug pat on the back. I could imagine those fingers turning into claws, shredding my heart out. Dutifully, I kept my fake plastic smile and lugged their luggage, 4 80-pound bags, the airline's allowed limit, back to the car and started the drive home. We discussed trivial matters about the flight on the meandering drive down I-81, 10 miles per hour under the speed limit. I can't remember what I asked and commented about, but I do remember the ringing getting louder and louder in my ears and the urge to puke on the steering wheel getting harder and harder to suppress. Suddenly, I broke. I looked at my father, my lungs empty and diaphragm full of lead, and told him, "Dad, I did something." My father, perceptively realizing his son does more things wrong than right, raised his eyebrow. Something really bad. I couldn't hear my mom in the back seat, which meant she was holding her breath. I could see my dad's eyes get imperceptibly wider in preparation for the evil stare, which was known to make several children and grown men soil themselves uncontrollably. "What did you do?" he finally asked. He was probably expecting a deck chair to be broken, perhaps an unmowed lawn, which is the usual extent of my parentless mischief. I drew it out, emptied the pool. He sat there stunned, processing the information for a few seconds or 10 minutes, I can't remember. I do remember a fleeting look of puzzlement. His mind was churning, trying to figure out what this meant. Could his son actually be this colossally stupid, his own? My father was first in his class in school. My mother was first in her class in school. Genetics dictate that they have a son with a decent amount of common sense. So his reaction, his deducing of what was going on, finally came up with the only sensible conclusion and reaction. My father laughed. He roared so loud that I had to wince a little, but it dawned on me that I had been worrying for nothing. My dad understood that mistakes happen. "That is really funny," he snorted. I felt like a big weight was lifting off my shoulders. Things were going to be all right. "Did you really think I was going to fall for that joke?" he finished, still chuckling. "You almost had me there for a second." The weight returned, double force. No, Dad, I mean it. I really emptied the pool." I think he was pondering the possibility that I had a UVA grad for an obstetrician and whether his real son had been switched at birth. "Not the whole thing?" he asked, still in disbelief. "No," I numbly answered. He looked a little relieved. "Just a few feet? Kind of, a foot or two off the bottom, the very bottom. Do you know how Caucasian people get red when they are angry, scared, upset? Well, it's a little less obvious on Indians given our darker skin. At that moment, my father could have been an albino. I've never seen his face change color that quickly or intensively. It's a good thing I was driving or he might have attacked me on the spot. I could tell you what he yelled at me for the next 15 miles, but thankfully I don't speak the language of my heritage that well, and that is mostly what he screamed at me. Basically, I think it was a 1,000-word Indian epithet for colossally stupid, lousy child who cannot possibly be of my loins. Eventually, he calmed down a little and succeeded in bringing his hands down from a choking gesture and took a few minutes for air. Then he yelled again, then rested, yelled some more, then quieted outright. Then he saw the pool. Needless to say, all hell broke loose. What happened next must have been pretty bad because I don't remember it that well, but I do remember thanking my lucky stars that I still had an apartment at Tech to which I could escape. But like all fathers, time and a probable investigation to confirm I was really his child calmed him down enough to remember he loved and could forgive me. Eventually, a tanker truck full of water came by to fill up the rest of the pool and life began to return to something somewhat normal. My father, the amateur roast master, realized he had great fodder to embarrass his son with all future family and social functions and learned to speak to me in a civil tone again. That is, until a few weeks later when our water well dried up. Story 3. Me and my girlfriend decided to get a bit experimental in the bedroom department and went to our local Victoria's Secret to see what they had to offer. After looking around and picking up a few bits and pieces, we decided to also get an item because they were cheap and we had never experimented in that area before. Later on that night, we started and it ended up hot and heavy, and before we knew it, I suggested we try some of our new toys. She keenly agreed, as one generally does, to new things when they are steamy. To her delight, she really enjoyed it. I then started putting in the item one by one, and occasionally she would tense so hard that one would pop out. But this is where I made a huge mistake. I decided to rip him out, like you would a Beyblade, thinking that it would make her climb the walls. It didn't. She waddled to the bathroom like a duck in tears, and I was left mortified. I followed her into the bathroom and cleaned myself up, as did she. I said that I would drive her to the local emergency room to get her some treatment, and she said yes. That was all she said. I knew she was upset with me, but I didn't expect what was to come. I pulled up outside the emergency room and she asked me to leave. Fair enough that it was my ignorance that got us into this situation in the first place. I should have thought about it and maybe done some research, but obviously hindsight wasn't going to help the awful situation I was now in. The way she looked at me broke my heart. I wanted to make this better, but I wasn't sure how. She didn't have any insurance, so I sent her a text saying that I would pay whatever it cost for all her treatment, and I got no reply. A couple months later, I got a call from her trying to take me up on my offer. I tried to fit more into the conversation, but all she wanted to say was meet me outside T&G's, which is a bar near where she lives. We sat down and had a chat, talked about what happened, and I started to feel more at ease as she started giggling at my ridiculous jokes, and I thought that we might actually be able to move on from this. I felt like a spark had made my heart start pumping again. After a few months of feeling heartbroken, it somehow instantly felt so much better. Anyway, after we had a few drinks, we started to talk about the medical cost. She said that she knew it wasn't my fault and she had tried to pay as much as she could, but there was some extra that she was hoping I could put towards. I didn't need to think about this because I had got us into this situation in the first place. I pulled out my checkbook and asked her how much she needed. She responded with about $350. I said, "Excuse me?" And she repeated, "I need about $350. And this is when I noticed she was a 20-story tall giant crustacean from the Paleolithic era. I said, "God dang it, Loch Ness Monster, I ain't gonna give you no $350. She then swam away and I never saw her again. Story 4. Let's see, where to start. I once drank a pint of vodka, straight, on a dare, spent the rest of the night ralphing. I fell for a prank of laying a stick across the shovel handle and then stomping the shovel spade to see how high the stick would go. I had my windshield tinted to 5%, my car. I sent a Nairobi prince some cash so I'd get a big return. I really did. I voted for Ross Perot in '92. I volunteered for several things in boot camp without knowing what they were. I rear-ended a cop car. During the questioning, I got the involuntary giggles, and when the cop asked if I thought it was funny, I said yes. In Little League, I chased a ball under the bleachers from the backside. Imagine running fast as the bleacher seats get lower and lower. Hit on a starting linebacker's girlfriend at a party. I even knew it was his girlfriend. Noticed my low oil pressure light in the car. I decided I could make it to the next exit, 10 miles away. Took bowling as a hypers class in college, cheated on the final exam, got caught. Decided to jump in the water to whiz, left the boat in gear. Spent a half hour trying to pick up a quarter someone had super glued to a sidewalk. I'm really not as dumb as all this sounds. I'm just impulsive. Yeah, the human embodiment of what could go wrong. Story 5. Back in my sophomore year in high school, this girl had convinced me to take her to the Christmas JROTC formal. It's also important to note that while I had my driver's license, I was still borrowing vehicles from family members, so social events meant I needed to be driven. So for the next several weeks leading up to the dance, we were both excited. She had described the dress she was going to wear and couldn't wait to see me in my navy dress uniform and all the colorful awards I had amassed by then. The big night came and I had managed to get a ride to the formal with a friend. I got there and spent most of the time waiting for my date, but still managed to have a tolerable time. I wasn't a big dancer back then. The night comes to an end and my date is nowhere to be found, so I head home a bit bothered that I went stag. The next day, let's just say she wasn't in a talking mood. We could pick our seats daily in this class, and in the weeks leading up to the dance, she would sit nearby. Now, she's clear in the other corner, which still wasn't enough room to get rid of the awkwardness that remained until the end of the year. And it's been permanently recorded whenever yearbooks got passed around that year. So, who knew your date expects to be picked up? That wasn't in our manual of regulations. Ouch. That's all I gotta say. Ouch. Story 6. I submitted this to another thread a while back, but I hope you guys like this one. So I used to get really, really bad head rushes when I stood up too fast. And this happened a lot when I was in my early teens. Anyways, I was lying down watching TV when my dad told me to turn the heat down. So I get up and feel kind of dazed, but continue to walk behind the couch towards the thermostat. On the long walk to the thermostat, my head rush starts to get more intense. I lose vision and lean against my electric piano for support. I lean there for about 30 seconds while it passes. When my vision finally returns, I'm standing over my piano thinking, turn down the heat, turn down the heat. So my deprived brain starts to bash the keys of the piano, hoping that the heat will turn it down. I am very confused at this point, but I think I know what I'm doing. Then I get the realization. I thought, wow, I'm so dumb. The heat isn't turning down because the piano isn't on. Stupid me. So I press the on button on the keyboard and start bashing the keys even more. Random notes start playing loudly, which makes me jump, finally realizing my true folly. I laugh out loud at how stupid my brain was and proceed to the thermostat to finally turn down the heat. This all happened within the span of about 40 seconds to a minute. The end. Story 7. I fell asleep on a roof, a slanted roof. I rolled over. Ever have one of those dreams where you're falling? I woke up just before I hit the ground. I rode my bike under a truck. I made a slingshot that fired metal discs through the trees. I took these plates off of my father's cars and bikes. I made a stump remover, basically an IED for farm work. Got confused and got the measurements wrong. I figured this out while a 2-ton stump was about 80 feet in the air. I thought that my juggling skills would impress girls at a party. I'd been drinking heavily. I'd slept with someone on a trampoline. Advice, if you ever want to try this, don't. Your thing can break. I'd slept with someone in the water at a beach. Advice, if you want to try this, don't. Sand gets everywhere. Took a half-pound of gunpowder to school. Tried to write my name on the football field. Turns out the guy with the distinctive name and no eyebrows can easily be identified. Another time I tried to jump a fence on a motorcycle, a barbed wire fence. Strangely, if this had gone just a little worse, the beach thing would have gone better. Parked my dad's car the wrong way, i.e. into a swimming pool. Tried to help a dog who had been hit by a car. That being said, I would do this again. Lots more, but I am a little tired. My wife thinks I am stupid, by the way. Story 8. I was outsmarted by a beetle 3 times once. It was embarrassing. So there I am, chilling in my living room with my cool Uncle James. We're doing our normal crap, watching movies and chatting about crap when his dog bolts across the room like when your cousin drops his phone and doesn't want you touching it in case you see what's on it. Now the dog only does this for one reason. He hates bugs and likes to stomp the crap out of them. Now life as a bug is hard enough without a fluffy terror the size of a Godzilla trying to screw you up, so I jump up to save this little buggy guy. I throw a glass on him and celebrate like the bug savior that I am. Now I have my bug in the glass and decide to put him outside. I slide some card under there and check to see if he's there. He's good, so I go outside, remove the card, and shake the glass and go back in to relax. Lo and behold, the little schmuck is on the ground where he was before I glassed him. I was like, well, crap. So I got the glass and card again, picked him up, put him in the glass, put the card on top, and went to drop him outside. Now, I don't know how the hell he did it again, but he was back in the same spot. So I'm done with him. I get a clear glass, pick him up, put him in it, and I look in to check he's there. Then I go throw him out. When I got back, the schmuck was there on the ground. I gave up at this point. He just became one of the family. Brought him a cup of tea and a biscuit and just let him live in the house. He earned it. If you're enjoying the video so far, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 9. I tried to rob an on-duty cop. I used to work at a gas station. Every night at this gas station, police officers would come in for some coffee and whatnot, and over time, I got to know a couple of them. Over time, it got to where we would talk about the weird crap they see on the regular and whatnot, and the crap they would help us deal with. I got some good cop stories from them and some even better gas station adventures from my days if anyone is interested. Anyway, one day I'm minding my own business, stocking the cooler when I hear Officer Ingram talking to my manager over the speakers in the cooler. They're there so that whoever is in the cooler can hear what is going on up front. I decided to come out of the cooler with my sweatshirt and a ski mask on and sneak up on Officer Ingram and see how a cop reacts to being robbed. So I started sneaking around the store, solid snake style, and I managed to go unseen by Officer Ingram. My manager, who was having a conversation with him, saw me but didn't give me away since it wasn't unusual for me to wear the ski mask outside the cooler. I get to the counter and I put my box cutter's blunt end, safety first, against the back of his neck, and I tell him in a voice much deeper than my regular voice to don't do anything stupid and call for help or anything, just give me your wallet. My manager was speechless. Officer Ingram didn't even flinch. He just took a sip of his coffee and told me that I must be the biggest idiot he had ever come across. It was at this point that I noticed my manager's eyes had dropped and I noticed that Ingram already put his hand on his weapon. Right as I heard the safety click, I dropped the act and told him it was me and that I was just playing. Ingram starts laughing out loud and tells me to chill out. He had seen me sneaking out the cooler and around the store on the computer screen up front with the live feed of the security cameras around the store. We had a good laugh about it immediately after. For a few days after that, when the other officers would come in, they would put their hands in the air or just throw me their wallets. It later dawned on me that if it wasn't for the manager leaving the security camera live feed on screen, I could have gotten hurt and charged with all sorts of crap. Story 10. I grew up as a really poor kid in a really poor part of Ukraine. We would break into industrial factory storage yards and just climb really tall crap. You know those videos of Russians climbing really tall radio towers? Yeah, that's pretty much the crap I do. One factory made some stuff out of glass and had these meter-long glass tubes that were about half-inch in diameter. We would, of course, steal those things and use them like blow-dart tubes. For ammo, we'd use these really acidic berries and just fire at each other. Getting hit with one stung about as much as getting hit with an airsoft pellet. My summers were filled with nightly bonfires in which we would often reach a level of stupid you can't imagine. We would throw aerosol cans into fires just to have them explode. We would take apart old car batteries, remove the lead, put lead into tin cans to melt it, and then dump into crappy molds we'd make in the ground to make little lead discs, crosses, ninja stars, or whatever else might have seemed like a good idea. Countless times, someone would get battery acid on their clothes or skin or otherwise get burned. This was many years ago, and I'm now a fairly well-off man living in Canada, but remembering this makes me wonder how in the hell I didn't pass away. Story 11. I'm stupid. I arrived in a new city 2 months ago and went out with my roommates. I was completely hammered, and we went out with my friends to some house on the other side of the town. After a while, I decided to go home because I was tired, except that I got completely lost. I walked for an hour and a half. My apartment is like 30 minutes away from where I was. So intoxicated me decides to call the firemen so that they could give me some directions. I had no money on my phone. At first, I called a child maltreatment hotline by accident. I have no idea how I did that. Then the firemen couldn't really understand me because of my slurred speech. Later, they asked me to give them my friend's number so he picks up where I am. I hang up and look for the number in my phone because I don't know it by heart. I tried to memorize the 10-digit number for like 10 minutes, but I couldn't do it because I was just too hammered. I decided to pick up a stone on the street and engrave the number on a random apartment door, except I couldn't read it myself, so I had to write it 3 times. The day after we looked on Google Maps where I was just 500 meters away from the place I left, even though I walked for 90 minutes. I was probably just walking around in circles. Story 12. I got a good one. Too bad it'll probably get buried, but I've got to tell it. So my wife went to Vegas on vacation with her friends. I was still youngish at the time, so I did the only natural thing and went out drinking. Unfortunately, I got completely obliterated. When I got home, I jumped in the shower because it made sense at the time, I guess. I started to get sick and climbed over to the toilet to retch up. After I finished, I went to push myself up, and when I put my weight on the toilet, it cracked in half. The porcelain god was fighting back, or so it seemed. I slashed my hand on the edge of the toilet after it cracked. And this was about when all reason left me. I didn't understand why there was water flooding the bathroom, so I flushed the destroyed toilet several times, flooding the bathroom even further. I then called my wife and left her this voicemail. Hi, I'm not sure where I am. I'm not sure who I am. There's mess everywhere. There's just mess everywhere. I gotta go. She was sitting in the airport with her friends about to fly home when she got the message. She tried calling me a few times, but I decided to pass out. When she couldn't get a hold of me, she then called my parents because the message scared the crap out of her. My parents drove over to my place and let themselves in. The next thing I knew, my dad was poking me with a broom, shouting, "Are you still alive?" After waking up and cleaning up the mess with me, my mom sat me down and had a nice chat. I felt really bad for the scare I put into my parents, but it eventually became a favorite story told around the campfire. Story 13. I was especially stupid in high school. This one time, my friends and I did some substance. We were rolling so hard somewhere along the line, I had the brilliant idea of going back to my house to grab the tabs I had there. So we got our one friend that didn't do it there to drive me there to grab them. When I got there, I decided to be sneaky, so I went around to the back and climbed my 10 or so foot tall fence. We had a pool, so it was one of those giant ones. I fell off at the top of the fence directly onto my back, making a loud crashing noise. Apparently, the sound of a 17-year-old falling from that height directly on concrete, making no attempt at catching at myself, makes a noise loud enough for their mom to hear it all the way from her bedroom. But no, she didn't catch me laying on the ground in pain. She caught me halfway through our door, attempting to crawl into our house. I was held on lockdown for about 6 months after that. My GF broke up with me after I told her. Story 14. I'm smart in general, but sometimes I derp out completely and look like the biggest idiot. Once I was reading a horror novel and I had my finger underneath the page. I turned the page and got startled because apparently I'd, 1, forgotten my finger was there, and 2, forgotten I even had that finger because I didn't even recognize it as mine for a moment. I only recently found out that if you put hot water in a pot instead of cool water, it'll boil faster, and so it shaves like 10 minutes off of your cooking time. The other day, I tried to open a can of evaporated milk, but the can opener just made a weird noise and didn't do anything. I got frustrated for a few seconds before realizing that it wasn't the can I was holding, it was my glass measuring cup. I'm terrified of roaches. Once I saw a fat roach on the floor of my bedroom and literally stood there for about 10 minutes with a shoe in my hand trying to work up the courage to throw it. Then I noticed the roach hadn't moved the whole time. I mustered up the courage to get closer and get a better look at it. I realized it wasn't a roach, it was just a black smudge on the floor that had collected a little lint. It's worth mentioning that I'm nearsighted and didn't have my glasses on at the time. For months, I really, truly thought you could download RAM. I had seen that download more RAM site and read some reviews, which I later found out were joking. And I told my mom and one of my friends about it. My mom looked at me with this awkward face. My friends started laughing the hell up. It wasn't until later that I learned you cannot download RAM. I am not computer savvy. I kept mistakenly calling surround sound around. Yeah, sound around. I think I'd been saying it for years, but nobody corrected me until I was in a conversation with some friends and said something like, yeah, I have sound around headphones. They're expensive, but so worth it. My boyfriend interrupted me and said, can you repeat that? I did, and everyone burst out laughing. I once derped out and asked my dad if the Rio Grande was actually in Rio de Janeiro. My dad just went, there's no such thing as a stupid question, but that was pretty close. I'm both my parents' smartest and dumbest child. Story 15. I lit my truck on fire. First, I went to a bar. It was a cold winter night, and when I went to unlock my door, I thought the lock was frozen, so I went to open the sliding back window instead. And I failed, dropping the keys between the truck box and bed, unable to reach them, but I had something in the box. After taking the fake Christmas tree out of the box, I started using it like a giant pipe cleaner, weaving it between the truck box and cab, trying to get to my keys in front of the bar, but no luck. So I went door to door asking for knives to pry open the window of my truck. Most of them, after telling them I was in the bar, didn't want me to hurt people. But eventually I found another idiot who gave me one. I'm in the truck. It's cold, super cold. It's full Canadian winter and it's just me and McDonald's trash and no keys. But is that a Tupperware container on the ground? Idea. Put the McDonald's paper in the Tupperware and light her up. That'll warm the place right on the center console. With my fireplace installed, I lit it up and took a selfie that I fortunately lost ages ago. While I was taking that selfie, the truck filled with smoke and the container melted, lighting up the center console and melting it to hell. Still keyless, I eventually called my dad to bring me my keys. The firefighting experience was quite sobering, and in an hour's time, I'd be on my way home. Story 16. One time I was late for a train from Brussels to London. We got there with a few minutes left and found out we had to go through airport-style security, X-ray machine, metal detector, and custom station, just a watered-down version. I wasn't expecting this at all. I was last in my group of friends and quickly put my backpack in the machine, then started to fill a bin with all my personal stuff. Belt, wallet, sunglasses, phone, passport, Belgian waffle covered in whipped cream. I turned to walk towards the metal detector and realized what I'd just done. I turned my back just in time to watch the black rubber flaps drag through the whipped cream and smear it everywhere. I covered the machine in whipped cream. However, because I was last and put it in the back of my bin, my friend's stuff and all my stuff was fine. I just looked at the security guy, grabbed my stuff, and yelled sorry as I ran towards customs. I could hear him screaming words at me as I ran. Well, that's one way to make a lasting impression at airport security. Story 17. I was 16. It had taken me weeks to gather the courage to ask this girl at my school if she'd go out with me. She said yes. So that afternoon, 16-year-old me was getting ready for the evening. I showered and then I was shaving. This was not the first time I had shaved, mind you, which makes this next part much worse. You know how sometimes you see yourself doing something and before it can set in how stupid it is, it's already done? Well, in the middle of shaving, I had leaned in towards the mirror and for some reason I was looking really closely at my nose. Then for some reason, still no GD clue why, I thought it would be a good idea to shave down the length of my nose. Imagine what it would look like if someone came up to you and drew a line down the middle of your nose with a red magic marker. That's what I looked like. Except it was a line of missing skin I took off with the razor, shaving my nose 3 hours before my date. Explaining that you cut yourself while shaving isn't a big deal, explaining that you cut yourself while shaving your nose is not quite as easy. Story 18. I'm late to this, but I'll share my story. Maybe someone will see it. Me in the mall in Houston with two friends who are from Houston. I am not. As we walk through the mall, I see the Abercrombie store and want to try some stuff on. They don't and tell me they'll meet me at some other store when I'm done. I go in, see a shirt I like, and take it to a changing room. Their changing rooms stay locked even though no one is in them, so I ask the girl to please unlock it. She gives me a slightly weird look, but complies and opens it. At the time, I was 19 and wore a medium-sized shirt, and I already owned some A&F shirts, so I'm familiar with them. That's how I knew that this shirt was way too tight, even for Abercrombie standards. I just think, man, this is tight, but maybe I've gotten fatter or something, and put my shirt back on and step out of the changing room. There's that same girl close by folding some clothes, so I ask her if I could get this same shirt in a large one. She has this look on her face that was just off, but she hands me one. I tried it on, and good God, it's still ridiculously tight. Now I'm wondering, what the heck, man? I know I ain't that big. Once again, I change back and leave the room and wander around the store for a second. And then I see it, a giant poster with some kids on it who were around 9 to 11 years old. I'm inside an A&F Kids. I got out ASAP and avoided eye contact with the employees as I did. I've never been so embarrassed. Story 19. I'm adding these as I remember them. In the 80s, I had a friend who was a David Lee Roth lookalike, 80s DLR, not today DLR. I hung around with him because he was so stupid that he was a constant source of amusement. To decorate my cheapo bachelor pad, I bought a secondhand surgical lamp. He wanted to see how bright it was, so he swiveled the lamp to his face and turned it on. Ow, 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 I'm blind. He stumbled around blindly knocking things over while we all laughed and laughed. The same friend called my home number and asked, "Where are you right now?" Keep in mind that this was the 1980s before cell phones were invented. He wouldn't eat beluga caviar because he thought it came from beluga whales. He was a big fan of the WWF wrestling, now WWE, and kept insisting it was real. He once met the local mayor at a restaurant and asked him to revoke the Iron Sheik's U.S. citizenship. The truly mind-boggling part is that we lived in Canada. He needed to mail a letter. Again, it was the 80s, so we were walking to the mailbox while he ate a chocolate bar. He neatly deposited the wrapper into the mailbox and the letter into the slot of a nearby garage bin. There was no fixing the situation, so I said nothing so he wouldn't feel stupid. Story 20. Stupid, beyond words, but not necessarily my fault. My girlfriend at the time and I were house-sitting for a friend of hers. She was asleep, and I was watching a 3-part VH1 documentary about the history of heavy metal. They covered the essential genesis of the genre to the modern-day trends, and in it, there was the obligatory nod to hair metal. Janie Lee, lead singer of Warrant, was on the show, and his part on it was burned into my mind due to how sad and pathetic of a story it was. Not to mention how bad he looked, overweight, worn out, the red, bloated face of a drinker. Anyway, he was talking about their last hit, Cherry Pie. He said he wanted to make an album that said something. He wanted to name it Uncle Tom's Cabin, have some songs of substance, that kind of thing. But the record label wasn't happy because there wasn't a catchy pop ditty, and they said they wouldn't release the album until Warrant wrote one. So Janny says he went back to his hotel room and wrote Cherry Pie in 10 minutes, and when they gave everything over to the label to complete the album changed the name of the album to Cherry Pie, and that became their new lead and hit single. Janny goes on to say that soon after that, grunge and alternative took over and hair metal all but passed away, and that Cherry Pie was Warrant's final hit and it wound up being his legacy. He said he hated that song, really freaking hated it, and that he could end himself for Cherry Pie. He was disturbed and distraught and looked like crap, and it was stuck in my head for days. I tell you that story to tell you this one. A few days later, I had to pick a friend up at the airport. He works in the music industry, and occasionally I'd give him a lift as he moved about the country. He told me in the phone call that he had an extra passenger and that she was going through a rough time, divorce, family and bills, all messy, kids and custody, that sort of thing. All right, no sweat. So I pick up my friend, his girlfriend, and their teary-eyed lady friend up at the airport, and we head out. We're chatting, making small talk, that sort of thing, and I bring up the VH1 heavy metal documentary because my friend is a huge metalhead, works on that end of the business, and has been there in its history in America for a long time. We talk about it a bit, he tells some stories, and I bring up the Janny Lane Warrant thing, and I blurted out something like, it was so sad and pathetic to see a man who was once king of the world look like absolute crap and talk about how much he hated his own music and his legacy. Things go completely quiet in the car, and my friend, who was in the front seat next to me, leans over and says, you might want to shut up. That's Janny's wife back there. I go to open my mouth, but no words come out. Story 21. I once found a 2-foot steel pipe lying around near a big bonfire we had going at my cottage. I decided to put the pipe in the fire, let it heat up a little, and then extinguish it in the water nearby. It was pretty cool, let off a decent sizzle. Then I thought I would do that again, but leave the pipe in the fire longer to heat up. I left it in there for half an hour before I took it out. The top third of the pipe was white hot, so I thought this was going to be good. My sister and cousin are swimming in the water, and I called out to them just before I put the pipe in the water. Hey guys, watch this. I put the pipe in the water, and I hear a big hissing sound. An instant later, a jet of boiling hot water shoots up out of the pipe and straight onto my chest. I drop the pipe and run inside to the bathroom. And if any of these stories got to you, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.